Hi, I'm Rich.
And I'm Tina.
If there's one thing we've learned in over 20 years of marriage,
It's that some days you'll feel like killing your husband.
and some days you'll feel like killing your wife.
Welcome to Love, Marry, Kill.
Hey, Tina,
Hey, Rich.
how are you
I'm
today?
great. How are you?
I am doing really good. Well, it is a busy time for us and for a lot of people. We're recording this on Saturday, November 22nd. Most of you will hear this on December 1st. I made a list of all the things that we've got coming up between now and then by the time
Okay.
people hear this. So
Okay.
my lovely sister and her husband are currently winging their way from California to Michigan. They're probably over Kansas right now.
Yeah, super excited to see them. It's been
Yeah,
too long.
that'll be great. Our son will be coming home from college. He may be on his way home now. I don't know, but he will be. Our daughter will be coming home for a little bit. We'll have had a very nice Thanksgiving, I'm sure. My birthday will have come and gone.
Oh my gosh, you and your birthday. You can't stop talking about it.
It's the most important day of the year.
Where can listeners send cash and gifts?
Patreon.com/lovemarrykill. That would be the best birthday gift. But also, the Lions will have won 2 games between now and then, including Thanksgiving against the Packers. Michigan will have won 2 games since then, including shocking the world, upsetting number 1 ranked Ohio State. So
Oh, is it almost at the end of the season?
it's the weekend of my birthday.
Oh,
It always comes back
that
to my
always makes
birthday,
me a
doesn't
little,
it?
Yeah, it really does. No, that makes me a little sad whenever Michigan season is
Well,
done. I didn't realize.
it won't be over because there will be bowl games.
Ohio State is
potentially.
really number one.
Yeah, they're number 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you've probably already finished your Christmas shopping too, you forgot about that because you're so good at being on top
It's
of
not
that.
on my list because I'm already done.
Right, exactly.
Yes. Well, I'm not really planning to do a lot in the next week, although it is Black Friday, I think, in there somewhere.
Yeah, I know a lot of people hate Black Friday, but it's hard not to take advantage of some of those deals. A lot of places though are starting their Black Friday shopping. We're still calling it Black Friday, but they're saying these are our lowest Black Friday prices, which is really good to see.
Yeah, that's helpful. Well, we hope that all of you who celebrate Thanksgiving had a really lovely time with family and friends.
I think our international listeners that don't celebrate Thanksgiving are intrigued by Thanksgiving and how we celebrate and what we eat. So hopefully I remembered to post a picture of what we cooked.
Yeah.
And hopefully the cherry chip cake came and we ate it and it was amazing. Thank you so much to everyone that reached out with tips on where to find cherry chip cake. As far as I know, only one person saw it in a store. But other than that, it's available on eBay and Walmart.com and I think Amazon.com. But it's all from the same seller, this Canada grocery store.
Yeah. It's funny how things we talk about, you never know what's going to really capture people's imagination. And we've gotten so many notes about the cherry chip cake.
Yeah, so
which
thoughtful.
is really nice.
Because everyone wants you to have a nice
know.
birthday.
I appreciate
As
it.
of today, it has not come and it has not shipped. So I'm not too optimistic, but
I'm counting on you. I know it'll happen.
no pressure. I could just drive to Canada.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
I am a little angry with you about a couple things, though I wanted to bring up on the air.
A couple of things on the all right.
No, it's not. It's the same thing, but I sent you 2 memes a few days ago that were really funny, and you haven't posted them on our social media.
And
Whenever I send you a meme that I think is funny, you always look at it and say, "Oh, I don't think it's that funny."
so what you don't realize, because I don't think you spend quite as much time on social media, a lot of times it's something that I have posted before. And I try not to repost things unless it's like really funny. So one of them was something that I had posted before.
Okay.
And sometimes they're a little hackneyed. And again,
That's just my sense of humor, I guess.
hackneyed?
Yeah.
I know. We know. We all know. Did you bring a snack for me today? I haven't eaten yet. And I'm a little
Changing
weak
the
with hunger.
topic. I did. I worked really
Well,
hard.
oh wait, I'm sorry. If you have other things that
No, that
dirty
was
laundry
it.
that you want to air, I'm
No.
sure there are many things that you could.
I said 2
talk
things,
about.
but it was just that I sent 2 memes. That's all. It was really the same thing. But
Well, I will post them if I can remember. I'll post them this week, and
Okay.
I always want to tell people because I think it's cute the things you send me sometimes. Like
Yeah.
a lot of times I will say, "Rich told me to post this. What do you think?"
yeah, I'm fine with
Sometimes
that.
it's like making fun of the wife, which is fair.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I worked really hard on these snacks
Yeah, you
today. I
did.
brought you some Reese's filled pretzels,
Thought I saved my appetite for that.
and I brought you some Sanders sugar cookie white chocolate sea salt caramels.
Gosh, where do you find the time, Rich, to do all this shopping?
All right, you bought both of these
Both of these
things.
things were in our cupboard.
Yes, you went out and bought some things, and I have run out of time. But I think these both look interesting. I think they're
So because
definitely
we're
worth
having
trying.
Thanksgiving and our son is coming home, I did buy more treats and there's a
Mhm.
lot of snacks in the cupboard.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed yet, but
Oh,
we
I've
are
noticed.
generally trying to eat healthier. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I am intrigued by the Reese's filled pretzels because anything Reese's I generally like. So I'm looking forward to trying those. And Sanders makes some great caramels. I've never had this particular white chocolate sugar cookie kind, but
the Sanders dark chocolate sea salt caramels are
oh, they're so
my
good.
favorite.
Yeah, they're really good. Well, let's give these a try. What did you think about the Reese's filled pretzels and the Sanders sugar cookie white chocolate caramels?
Well, full disclosure, I bought the Reese's pretzels yesterday from Costco.
Hmm.
And I always have to have, I don't know if everyone does this, but I always have to rip open a bag on my way home.
Of course.
I didn't eat lunch, so I was really hungry. I like them a lot. The peanut butter is the Reese's peanut butter.
Yeah.
So I thought they were a little sweet, but the pretzels I think are perfection.
I liked them, but I thought they were a little weird. I don't know, maybe it's the sweetness of the peanut butter, but I'm also, to me, Reese's, it indicates chocolate and peanut butter together. So the fact that it's just peanut butter is a little bit weird to me.
I thought for a peanut butter pretzel, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of varieties of those on the market. A lot of people are making them. The peanut butter was, a little sweet, like I
Yeah.
said. But I thought they were, I would give them probably a 7.5 out of 10.
I'll give them a 6.5 out of 10.
Oh, okay. The caramels, I didn't really love because I like the chocolate ones so
Yeah.
much. I would give them like a 6 out of 10.
I definitely like the dark chocolate ones better. The white chocolate's a little
Just a
bit
little
more
weird.
kind of sickly
Yeah.
sweet sort of thing, but I'd give them 7 out of 10. Still very good.
Yeah. This time of year, we're all thinking about Christmas and gifts. Sanders is a great Michigan-based company that we love to support. SANDERS.com. They have a lot of great gift ideas.
Absolutely. So when I'm researching a case, one of the things that I find most fascinating is when investigators have to get creative. Like situations where the police are convinced that they know who committed the crime, but they can't prove it. Like they don't have the evidence to prove it. And so they start thinking outside of the box and doing very creative things, which can be brilliant, but it can also kind of cross a line between, ethically
I was going to say that, absolutely.
and legally uncertain areas. So this case features some of the most unusual, clever, and maybe controversial police tactics that I've seen. So as you listen, I'll be curious to hear what you think, whether investigators stayed on the right side of that line or did they go too far. It was a rainy Monday evening, September 15th, 2014, in Pickering, a quiet lakeside suburb just outside of Toronto, when the first 911 call came in at 7:50 p.m. Flames were pouring from a two-story home on Pebblestone Crescent. Inside that house lived 39-year-old Carmela Knight, her husband David, and their 2 young sons. When the fire trucks arrived, neighbors ran outside in disbelief. Friends called Carmela's number again and again, but got no answer. Carmela's mom, Franca, heard about the fire and rushed over to find fire still licking the roof of the garage. The garage door stood open. She rushed toward it, just far enough to glimpse what looked like a body on the floor before police stopped her. Minutes later, Carmela's sister Nancy pulled up, desperate for answers. She tried calling David over and over, but he didn't pick up either. Eventually, Franca and Nancy learned that David and the boys were safe. They had been at hockey practice. Relief washed over them for a brief moment until they heard the rest. Firefighters had found a body inside the garage. It would take a couple of days to confirm the identity, but deep down, Franca, Nancy, and Carmela's friends already knew. And it didn't take long before they, and investigators, began to suspect David Knight had something to do with Carmela's death. But David had an airtight alibi. Getting to the truth would require months of persistence, creativity, and luck. And even then, there was no guarantee that justice would be served.
It's 7:50 p.m. when the 911 call comes in.
Right?
Is it typical that David and the boys would be gone at this time? You said they were at hockey practice.
Yeah, it was
So
a
it was
normal
nothing
thing
out of
for
the
them.
ordinary.
Nope,
Okay.
not out of the ordinary.
And do you know how old the boys are?
They were 10 and 12 at this point. People who knew Carmela Augusta in college said that she was a sweetheart, completely genuine with a heart of gold. If you met her, you instantly felt like friends. She loved to laugh and have fun, but even in her early 20s, she knew what she wanted, to get married and start a family. One night when she was 23, she met the man who would help make her dream come true, David Knight. They met at a nightclub and hit it off right away. The next day, David sent her flowers to say how happy he was to have met her. Carmela was impressed. It wasn't often a guy sent flowers before the first date. It didn't take long for them to realize that they wanted to build a life together. They got engaged on Christmas Day and were married in a big Italian wedding in 2000. A couple years later, Carmela gave birth to a baby boy, and then, a couple years after that, another boy. She was overjoyed. They eventually bought a beautiful 4-bedroom home in a quiet Pickering neighborhood just east of Toronto. David worked as a project manager in construction and did well. Together with Carmela's mother, Franca, they even bought a vacation home in Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, a spot that they rented out when they weren't there themselves. As the boys grew, they were active, riding dirt bikes and playing hockey. Carmela became the quintessential Canadian hockey mom, supportive, proud, always cheering from the stands. Life was good, or at least it seemed that way.
What percentage of young Canadians do you think grow up on the ice playing hockey?
Oh gosh, I would have to imagine it would be like 80%.
Yeah. Hockey here, because we're so close to Canada, is very popular too.
It wasn't big when I grew up, but now it does seem to be really popular here. In 2012, 12 years into their marriage, while staying at the family's vacation home in Florida, David Knight met a woman named Jill Hartman at a bar in St. Petersburg. He told her he was divorced, and the two began a relationship. It didn't take long for Carmela to sense that something was wrong. David started acting differently, working late, going out more, taking more frequent work trips, and getting strange phone calls. I'm not sure if David it sounds like he went to Florida often on his own, and I'm not sure if there was a business reason for that. He was in construction, and I think he may have been looking at starting a business in Florida. So
it seems odd if you're in Toronto to go work on a job in Florida. It's so far away.
I think maybe they had some connections there or something, but it seemed like Florida was a regular destination for him. When Carmela confronted him, David eventually broke down and admitted that he had been having an affair. He seemed genuinely remorseful, promising to end it and agreeing to attend marriage counseling. Carmela had even started drafting a separation agreement, but decided to give him another chance. For a while, it looked like he might actually be trying. Then, in June 2014, Carmela found a thumb drive in David's car. When she plugged it into her computer, what she saw left her stunned. Nude and suggestive photos of a woman, including one of David kissing her on the cheek. It turned out the affair hadn't ended after all. That was it. Carmela told David she was filing for divorce. He begged her for another chance, but she refused. In anger, he smashed their wedding photo. While Carmela was hoping for an amicable split, things quickly turned ugly. David started telling other hockey parents that Carmela was staying out late, taking drugs, gambling, and seeing another man. Her friends knew that every word of that was a lie. When Carmela's mother, Franca, learned the divorce was coming, she confronted David about the vacation home in Florida. She, Carmela, and David had all contributed to buying it in 2011, but when Franca checked the title, only David's name was listed.
No way.
Somehow, hers and Carmela's names had been removed before the title had been registered. I think when they filled out whatever the paperwork you need to register a title, all of their names were there, and then David took it in and crossed their names out.
Wow.
David promised Franca that he would fix it, but instead, he quietly transferred ownership of the home to his brother, Matthew. Meanwhile, the Knights' finances were collapsing. David, who had either moved out or was sleeping in a separate room, I read 2 different accounts, he had stopped paying the mortgage, and he had also stopped helping with the boys, who were 10 and 12. Carmela confided in a friend that she was drowning in debt and didn't know how she'd recover.
Did Carmela work outside of the home?
She did. She had a job at a bank. I'm not sure exactly what she did, but yes, she worked at a bank. Carmela's attorney filed for an emergency motion for custody and support. The hearing to decide on that motion was set for Thursday, September 18th, 2014. That was 3 days after the fire that killed Carmela. Just days earlier, on Saturday, September 13th, Carmela confided in a friend at her son's hockey game that she was growing increasingly afraid of David. He had become more aggressive, and she feared that if things got worse, he might try to kill her. The friend, who happened to be a Toronto police officer, was alarmed. He urged her to contact her local police in Durham, but Carmela was reluctant. She didn't want to escalate things. She just wanted to move on with her life and be done with David.
Just 2 nights after that alarming conversation, Pickering was draped in drizzle when smoke began pouring from the roof of the Knight's home on Pebblestone Crescent. Fire trucks raced to the scene just before 8. Carmela's friend and neighbor, Anna Connolly, ran outside as sirens wailed down the street. Seeing the glow from the Knight's garage, her heart pounded. She didn't know if Carmela, David, or the boys were inside. She called Carmela's phone again and again with no answer. Hoping they were together, she called Carmela's mother, Franca. But Franca hadn't seen her at all that day. When Anna told her what was happening, Franca grabbed her keys and sped toward the house. Inside the garage, firefighter Steve Grubbage was knocking down small spot fires. In the poor visibility, he tripped over something and fell to the floor of the garage. He turned his flashlight toward the object he had tripped over and froze. Lying there was what appeared to be a badly burned body. By the time Franca arrived, the flames were mostly out, but the garage roof still hissed with smoke. She ran toward the open garage door, glimpsed the shape on the floor, and was stopped by police before she could get any closer. Why would they just leave her body there?
I think they were still in the middle of trying to get the fire completely out, so they probably just hadn't been able to, do anything yet to cover up the body or to remove it at that point.
But they knew that she was there. They had discovered her already.
I think they had probably just discovered her shortly before Franca arrived.
Carmela's sister Nancy arrived moments later, frantic, trying to reach David, but he wasn't answering his cell phone. Terrified that the whole family may have been inside, Franca and Nancy were escorted to the police station to wait for news. There, officers told them that David and the boys were safe. The police had gotten in touch with David. They'd been at hockey practice in Toronto when the fire broke out. Relief washed over them for a moment until they heard the news. There had indeed been a body found in the garage. Dental records would be needed for confirmation, but Franca and Nancy already knew. Just the day before, Carmela had been helping Nancy plan her wedding, and now she was gone. It seemed surreal. Not long after, David arrived at the station with the boys. He left the children in the car with his father while he spoke with police. When told that officers found a body, as yet unidentified, he broke down crying. Officers noted that his grief seemed genuine. Later, David told the boys that their mother was gone. Their younger son, Dylan, would later recall the anguish in his father's voice as he wept. At first, Franca and Nancy tried to come up with an innocent explanation. Carmela sometimes went out to the garage for a smoke. With dirt bikes and gas cans stored there, could something have accidentally ignited? But investigators quickly realized this was no accident. Carmela's body told a different story. She had a tourniquet wrapped around her arm and a syringe lying nearby. It looked like a possible drug overdose. But her family and friends immediately dismissed this idea. Carmela wasn't a drug user. She barely even drank a glass of wine now and then. The autopsy raised even more questions. Beneath her charred skin, the tissue underneath was largely intact, revealing grim details. Carmela had facial injuries consistent with blunt force trauma. And the cause of death? Strangulation from neck compression. She had been murdered before the fire was set. Lab tests added one final twist. The syringe contained traces of cocaine, but toxicology showed no drugs in Carmela's system. Whoever killed her had tried to stage the scene to make it look like she'd been using drugs.
It's a very strange scene. Like the whole thing is just odd. The fire, the tourniquet around her arm, the syringe, cocaine is just kind of an odd, just an odd set of circumstances.
Well, especially the tourniquet. Do you have any explanation for that?
We'll talk a little more about that.
Okay. Investigators quickly learned that Carmela and David's marriage had been falling apart. David described the separation as amicable, but Carmela's friends and family told a different story. Detectives needed to verify his alibi. David said he left the house around 3:30 that afternoon with the boys. They grabbed McDonald's, then drove to Toronto for hockey practice, which ran from 6:30 to 8 p.m.
I just want to make one comment around the timeline here. I know that he left the house at 3:30. I know he went to McDonald's. I don't know why it was 3 hours between the
Yeah, I was
then and
going
the
to
hockey
ask
practice.
you.
I'm not sure if they did other things in there, but
Mhm.
it seems like, whatever his story was, the timing did check out.
Carmela had come home from her banking job around 5 p.m., and the fire started sometime after 7:30. If David's story checked out, he couldn't have been at the scene. Police interviewed other hockey parents who saw David there, skating around and helping on the ice as he often did. Surveillance footage from the rink confirmed it. David was exactly where he said he was. Then came an intriguing clue. The Knights didn't have video surveillance, but their alarm system recorded interior door activity between 3:30 when David left and 5 when Carmela arrived home. Several interior door sensors were triggered, meaning someone had been inside moving around. Had someone been lying in wait for her? Another intriguing detail came from Franca. She told police that just days before the fire, a strange man had appeared at the house. Carmela was in the backyard when this man suddenly looked over the fence and asked for David. She told him David wasn't home. The man just laughed, turned, and walked away. Carmela ran inside, looking out the front window just in time to see him climb into a black SUV and drive off. She didn't recognize him, but the encounter left her shaken. When she told David about it, he brushed it off, but then immediately began acting paranoid, setting the alarm that night for the first time in a while. With David's alibi seemingly airtight, investigators turned to Carmela's circle for insight. Did she have enemies? A secret life that could explain her murder? No one could think of a single person who disliked her. Everyone described her as warm, generous, and kind. In October, hundreds of mourners packed into a Pickering church for a celebration of Carmela's life. The sanctuary held 600 people, and every seat was taken, with others standing against the back wall. Conspicuously absent, though, were David and the boys. Members of the boys' hockey team came in their jerseys to support the family, but David told team officials he wouldn't be there with his sons. He said it wouldn't be a safe environment for them.
I have no idea what that means, why he would have made that comment, but
He's trying to imply that whoever killed his wife was probably looking for him too.
I suppose so.
That's ridiculous.
Yes.
We'll be back after a break.
As detectives followed up on the lead about the man in the black SUV, a new tip came in, one that changed everything. It came from David's sister-in-law, Heather Knight, who was married to David's brother, Matthew. Matthew had been living in Florida since early September, doing some work for David, and he returned to Canada just a few days before Carmela was killed. Then, only 2 days after the murder, he abruptly left Canada and went back to Florida.
Remind me what they did in Florida.
They had a vacation home there, and I believe David was also doing some work there or looking to start a business there. He was in construction. He did project management, and I think maybe he was looking to Florida as a new business opportunity.
Gotcha.
When he left Canada to go back to Florida, to Heather, his wife, it felt like he was running away and that he didn't plan to come back. But what truly haunted her were the words he said before leaving. "I know who, what, when, where, and how," Matthew told her. "With one phone call, I could have stopped this, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life." And then he broke down in tears. He added, "Maybe 20 or 30 years down the road when we're on a beach somewhere, I'll tell you everything, but I can't now. I don't want you to be in that position." Detectives were stunned. When they asked Heather about his behavior and activities on the night of the fire, she said that they had been together all day. There was no way that Matthew could have killed Carmela himself. But later that night, as soon as Matthew heard about the fire, he suddenly rushed out of the house. Heather assumed that he had gone to see his brother, but then David called her asking if she'd seen Matthew, so clearly the brothers weren't together. Heather later found out that Matthew had gone to visit a friend named Graham McDonald. Why, in the middle of a family tragedy, would he run to see a friend? Investigators needed to find out who Graham McDonald was and what he knew. Graham McDonald and Matthew Knight had met while working at a company called Hot Sets, which builds custom film and TV sets. They became friends, and eventually Matthew introduced Graham to his brother David. Graham was a handyman who took on odd jobs, and David needed work done around his house. Graham helped out, and before long, he and David struck up a friendship as well. When detectives brought Graham in for questioning, they asked where he had been the day of the fire. He said that he'd gone to visit his grandmother in Toronto, but she hadn't been home. After that, he claimed he took the GO train back to Pickering and walked nearly an hour to Moody's Motel, where he was staying at the time. Investigators pulled surveillance footage from his grandmother's apartment complex. There was no sign of him. They also checked the GO train video from that same day, and again, nothing. That's when detectives began to wonder, during all those days Graham had spent working at the Knight's home, had he perhaps developed some kind of fixation on Carmela? They brought him back in for another interview and confronted him about his shaky alibi. Graham insisted that he had been in Toronto, but admitted that his memory was fuzzy. He said he had smoked crack and taken a couple of Percocets that night, and things were hazy. As the questions kept coming, Graham grew defensive. Finally, he pushed back from the table and said he was done talking, and then he walked out. So this Graham McDonald is kind of a shifty character. Like he's living at this cheap motel. He doesn't have a home. He's sort of almost a drifter in a way, doing odd jobs for people. So definitely someone that caught the attention of investigators.
Okay.
Meanwhile, investigators headed to Florida. There were two people they needed to talk to, David's brother Matthew Knight and his alleged girlfriend, Jill Hartman. Jill was cooperative. She told them that she and David had met at a bar about a year and a half earlier, and that he had told her that he was divorced. She said she knew nothing about his life in Canada, only that when he was in Florida, the two spent a lot of time together. I would consider it boyfriend and girlfriend, she said, but I don't know how serious. He lived there and I lived here. It became clear that David Knight had been living a double life. Do you think it's unusual that this woman is dating this guy in Florida, but he lives in Toronto? And I don't know how often he was in Florida,
Sounds
but
like he was there kind of a lot.
He must have been there fairly regularly, but she didn't seem to know anything about his life in Toronto, didn't seem that curious about it, even though she considered him her boyfriend.
Well, do you think it's odd that a young woman from Illinois was dating an older man from Michigan? And
I mean, long distance relationships happen, but you knew what I did in Michigan, and I knew what you did in Illinois. It's like we knew about each other's lives pretty much.
Yeah.
Matthew, on the other hand, wasn't nearly as forthcoming. Detectives went to his house in Florida, but got no answer. When they finally reached him by phone, he was defensive and dismissive. He insisted that the story his wife Heather had told them was made up. She was just trying to cause trouble, he said. He told them he had no intention of returning to Canada, and then he hung up. Back in Ontario, Carmela's mother Franca was growing increasingly frustrated. From her perspective, weeks had passed with little progress in the investigation. She didn't know the inner workings of the investigation, only that her daughter was gone and no one had been held accountable.
But detectives weren't giving up. They tried to speak with David again, but he refused to cooperate and quickly lawyered up. A look into his finances told a troubling story. He was drowning in debt and had stopped paying the mortgage on the family home. And the pressure was mounting. Just 3 days after Carmela's death, a court hearing had been scheduled to determine custody and support payments, a proceeding that would have made David's financial situation even worse. Then there was the mysterious man in the black SUV, the one who had frightened Carmela shortly before the fire. Investigators eventually identified him as David's former business partner, who claimed that David had stolen $200,000 from him. The money had been meant to start a construction company, but the business never got off the ground, and David had been dodging his calls ever since. The man admitted he'd gone to the house that day to confront David, not Carmela, and police concluded that he had no role in her death. Still, it was another window into David's crumbling finances and growing list of enemies. And then came another revelation. David had taken out 2 life insurance policies on Carmela, totaling $850,000. It was more than enough to establish motive, but not proof. Investigators were certain David Knight had a hand in his wife's death. What they didn't have yet was evidence to tie him to it. By December, 3 months after Carmela's murder, detectives secured approval to tap David Knight's phone. What they heard only deepened their suspicions. David was planning a fresh start. He talked with family about moving to Florida, describing the house he wanted to buy, close to good schools with a big backyard for the boys. So he had custody of the boys after Carmela's death.
Yes.
They also learned that around the time of Carmela's death, David had been trying to buy a construction company in Florida for $900,000, but his finances were a mess and a payment deadline was fast approaching. If he missed it, the deal would fall apart. The pressure was mounting from all sides.
He was going to buy a construction company for $900,000. He had life insurance on his wife for $850,000, very similar amount.
Do you know if the insurance policies paid out?
I don't know for sure, but I think because there was an active investigation and her death was labeled a homicide, that I'm guessing that they did not pay out until the investigation was done.
Early in the investigation, authorities had seized David's passport to prevent him from leaving the country. But phone calls he exchanged in December with Jill Hartman, his girlfriend in Florida, made it clear he intended to go anyway. He talked about making arrangements for his kids and even his dog. Alarmed, detectives discovered that David had simply gone to the passport office, claimed he'd lost his passport at the gym, and been issued a new one.
This is the second time. We did another case a while ago where somebody did that. It boggles my mind. This is Canada, not the U.S., but how easy it is to get a new passport, like after the police have
Well, this was at least 10 years ago, so maybe it's not as easy today.
Yeah.
On the evening of December 14th, investigators intercepted a call between David and a private pilot named Bassam al-Siraj. David was trying to charter a plane to Florida. Immediately, Bassam found one leaving the next morning. The price was steep, $15,000. David wired the money that night. Police knew that if he got on that plane, justice might slip away for good. They didn't yet have enough evidence to arrest him, but they could stop him from fleeing. They contacted Toronto police, who sent an officer racing to the airport. When David arrived, dog and luggage in tow, the officer approached and said, "I'm seizing your passport on behalf of the government of Canada." David's plan was foiled.
And by the way, he never got his $15,000 back.
I wouldn't think so. If he had gotten to Florida, though, wouldn't he have been extradited pretty quickly back
He
to
could have
Canada?
been, for sure, but I think it would have just made the investigation more difficult.
By January 2015, investigators were convinced that David Knight, Graham McDonald, and possibly Matthew Knight were all involved in Carmela's murder. But none of the three men were talking, and without solid evidence, the case was at a standstill. Detectives believed David had likely hired Graham to carry out the crime. But at that point, it was only a theory. They needed to take bold action. So they decided to launch an undercover operation, one targeting Graham McDonald. Graham was a drug user with no fixed address, by this time living out of a cheap motel in Port Hope, about 45 minutes from Pickering. Investigators knew he wasn't the mastermind. He was vulnerable and possibly susceptible to deception. Enter an undercover officer whom we'll call Joe.
His real name and undercover name have never been revealed to maintain his anonymity, so I just gave him the name Joe.
Okay. Joe's mission was simple: befriend Graham. Joe checked into the same motel and one night in the bar accidentally spilled his beer near Graham. It sparked a casual conversation and then another round of drinks. The two men hit it off, and before long they were drinking buddies. Once Joe had earned Graham's trust, he told him he sometimes did small-time criminal work, moving stolen goods, that kind of thing, and he asked Graham if he wanted in. Graham said sure. As the friendship grew, Graham began to open up. He mentioned that police were looking at him for a murder in Pickering a few months earlier. Joe told him that he might be able to help. He knew people, connected people. One of them, he explained, specialized in making legal problems disappear. His name? Uncle Dan. But in Canadian police parlance, he was known by another name, Mr. Big. Not Carrie Bradshaw's Mr. Big, though.
No.
Let's go down a quick rabbit hole. Mr. Big, operations are a uniquely Canadian police tactic. Elaborate, expensive, and controversial. They're designed to extract confessions from suspects when investigators don't have enough physical evidence to charge them. This method dates back to 1965 when the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, were investigating a former Vancouver police constable suspected of stealing $1.2 million in canceled currency. Two undercover officers posed as members of a violent crime ring. They befriended the suspect and eventually drew out a confession. He was convicted, and the tactic was born. Over the decades, Mr. Big became one of Canadian detectives' signature tools, but also one of its most disputed. The tactic has led to several wrongful convictions. Here are two of the most notorious examples. First, the Andy Rose case from British Columbia in 1983. German tourists Andrea Scherpf and Bernd Gornicki were murdered near Chetwynd. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
A town nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Years later, Andy Rose was convicted twice, based almost entirely on the testimony of a single witness who claimed she saw him drunk and covered in blood the night of the killings. Both convictions were overturned on technicalities, and doubts deepened when another man in California confessed to his wife that he was the real killer before taking his own life. Still, the RCMP wasn't ready to give up. They still believed Andy Rose was the killer. In 1999, desperate for a confession, they launched a Mr. Big sting. Undercover officers posed as members of a criminal gang and befriended Rose for months, drawing him into their world. Eventually, they introduced him to the crime boss, Mr. Big himself. After a few drinks and relentless pressure, Rose gave the confession they wanted. But years later, DNA evidence cleared him. The case collapsed, and the operation was widely criticized as an example of how far Mr. Big tactics could go in manufacturing a confession rather than uncovering the truth. The second example is the Nelson Hart case from Newfoundland in 2002. Hart's twin daughters, Krista and Karen, drowned when they fell from a wharf in Little Harbor. Hart, who had epilepsy and only a fourth-grade education, said one child fell in, and he ran for help because he couldn't swim. When rescuers arrived, both girls had drowned. The police weren't buying his version of events. To get a confession, they built an elaborate Mr. Big sting. Officers posed as part of a nationwide crime ring, showering Hart with friendship, luxury trips, meals, and cash. They gave him a sense of belonging he'd never had before. Eventually, Hart was introduced to the boss, Mr. Big, who told him he needed to clean up his past before joining the organization. Feeling pressure to impress his new friends and terrified of losing their approval, Hart confessed to pushing his daughters into the water, even reenacting the crime on video, and he was convicted of murder. But in 2014, the Supreme Court of Canada overturned the verdict, ruling that confessions from Mr. Big operations are presumptively inadmissible. The court found that the tactics created a risk of false confessions, especially for vulnerable individuals like Hart. As of 2008, the Mr. Big technique has been used in more than 350 investigations across Canada. It's still legal today, but heavily restricted. There are two key requirements to make a Mr. Big operation admissible in court. First, prosecutors must prove that any confession obtained is reliable, and second, that the police methods used wouldn't bring the administration of justice into disrepute. The second part essentially means that police can't use tactics that are so unfair, abusive, or deceptive that they would make the justice system look bad or untrustworthy. For example, threatening or coercing the suspect, using violence or extreme intimidation, or generally behaving in ways that shock the conscience or make the public think the justice system is dirty or corrupt. Outside Canada, the Mr. Big practice is largely banned. The United States, the United Kingdom, and several other countries prohibit or severely limit the use of Mr. Big-style operations.
I know that was a bit of a long rabbit hole, but I found it really interesting. I think it's a really interesting tactic, and it's very uniquely Canadian, but also it's very relevant for the rest of the story. And I find it interesting that these operations are usually very elaborate. Like they involve a lot of people. They involve these like kind of wild stories that they draw somebody into. And it can definitely be, something where they extract a confession that isn't real. And I think that's the risk here, is that you get somebody so entrenched and you become friends with them, and they'll be willing to say things just to stay in that inner circle.
Yeah, it is crazy.
We'll be back after a break. Let's get back to Graham, Joe, and Uncle Dan. Once Joe learned about Graham's legal troubles, he offered to introduce him to a fixer, Uncle Dan, a man who supposedly made problems disappear. The meeting was set in an ice fishing shanty on a frozen lake. On the drive there, Joe and Graham were pulled over. It looked like a routine traffic stop, but it had been staged by the undercover team, meant to rattle Graham. The officer made a point of letting Graham overhear the radio when he ran his name and was told that he was a suspect in a murder investigation. After a tense pause, the cop let them go with a warning. Shaken, Graham and Joe pressed on to the shanty, which was wired for sound, as detectives listened from the shore. While they sat on the ice, Uncle Dan asked about Graham's problem. Graham hesitated. "They're starting to throw my name around," he said. "I don't know if they're using me as a scapegoat." Uncle Dan jumped in. "So are you telling me you had nothing to do with this whatsoever? Are you telling me that?" Graham paused and shook his head. I can't." Uncle Dan pressed. "What do you mean you can't?" Graham admitted. "I can't say I never had nothing to do with it." Uncle Dan bluntly asked, "Did you kill the broad?" With tears in his eyes, Graham nodded. "Yes," he said. Detectives listening on the shore high-fived in a moment of celebration, but they knew the confession was only the start. They still needed the rest of the story, and they needed to link Graham's admission to David Knight. At that point, Uncle Dan played it cool, not pressing too hard, and promised Graham he would look into a solution and be in touch soon. A week later, Uncle Dan invited Graham to his office where he said he had the solution to his problems. The solution took the form of a dying man, another undercover officer that we'll call Ron. Ron was supposedly a terminally ill cancer patient who only had a few months to live. If Graham would just agree to put $20,000 in a trust fund for Ron's 2 sons, he would provide a deathbed confession to the murder of Carmela Knight. Uncle Dan made it even easier. He offered to front the $20,000 to Graham, who could work it off later. It was a perfect scheme, and Graham agreed. But to make it work, Ron would need details. He needed to be able to convince the police that he did indeed kill Carmela.
Wow.
This is so elaborate, but it's really brilliant too, because basically they're saying, Ron will admit to this, but you got to give him details. Otherwise, he's not going to be able to convince the police.
So Ron is pretending to have terminal cancer.
Right.
And saying, you give me the $20,000 for my sons and I'll admit to it and I'll be dead.
Because I'm going to die anyway.
I'll be dead before you can prosecute me.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Ron, the dying man, came to Dan's office in a wheelchair, complete with an IV bag and makeup to make him look like he was not long for this world. Uncle Dan, Ron, and Joe sat Graham down and said, "Tell us everything, every little detail." Graham did. He said that on the day of the murder, he and David had gone to a gas station together to fill cans for the fire. David then left with the boys for hockey at about 3:30, leaving Graham alone in the house. He waited until Carmela arrived home from work around 5 o'clock. She came in through the garage. He ambushed her from behind with a ratchet strap as she entered the kitchen. She fought. He chased her around the island until he could tackle her, and then used the strap to strangle her to death.
What is a ratchet strap?
So it's like something you use to tie down stuff like on your trailer.
Oh, okay.
It's like a strap with like a thing you can tighten it with. She fought for about 15 minutes, Graham told them, which doesn't sound like much, but it's a long fucking time. He said it took him half an hour afterward just to catch his breath. He then dragged her to the garage and tried to make it look like a drug incident. He pulled out what he called his junkie kit, a syringe, a tourniquet. He tried to inject cocaine into her arm, but with no blood circulating in her body, it didn't work. So he left the tourniquet on, placed the needle beside her, and put a small baggie of cocaine in her purse. He left her body face down by a chair to suggest that she had stood up and then collapsed.
I have to admit something here. I am kind of dim sometimes. The first time, I think in the intro, you mentioned that she had a tourniquet around her arm. I was thinking like a sling, like that kind of.
Oh.
Like her arm was injured. So
gotcha.
Tourniquet
could mean that. Now it all makes sense.
Now it all makes sense because I was so confused. Like, why would her arm be in a tourniquet?
Got it. Then he waited until nightfall. He knocked over a can of gas, waited 10 minutes to let it soak in, and then tossed a lit candle into the pool of fuel. The fire took off stupid fast, as he put it, and he ran for the door. But he didn't count on the intense pressure that would result from the blazing inferno, pressure that made it very difficult for him to open the door. He told the undercover cops, "Fuck, it was scary, man. Everything went up. I couldn't get the doors open. It was scary. I went out through a side door I didn't want to use because there's an alarm system. From there, he ditched his outer clothes and walked back to the motel. Graham told the undercover team that David had promised him $100,000 and a job in Florida for carrying out the killing. In reality, though, he'd been paid only $2,000 and given a ride to his mom's house in Colborne. After that, David ghosted him.
It makes me so sick. Not that it's better if it was $100,000, but that someone would kill a person for $2,000.
Yeah. Graham told them that David had supplied 2 burner phones that they used to plan the scheme. Frustrated and feeling betrayed, Graham even hinted that he might blackmail David or make him disappear too, saying, "I did it once, I could do it again and make sure I get it right the second time." Uncle Dan and the others discouraged any talk of violence. The undercover team, of course, didn't want anyone else killed. What they wanted was one simple thing: cash. An exchange of money would be the key piece of evidence to connect David to the crime.
Do you think Graham was at all suspicious when they kept pressing for more details? Like they wanted every single minute detail?
The way that the undercover cops explained it to Graham is they needed every detail. Otherwise, Ron wouldn't be able to convince the police that he did it. So he had to have every detail. So
that makes sense.
I think Graham was maybe not the sharpest knife in the drawer anyway, but I think he bought into it.
Now, Graham had shared details that only the killer could have known. Some were facts police had intentionally kept from the public, like the baggie of cocaine in Carmela's purse. Others, like the purchases of gasoline with David and the use of burner phones, were things investigators hadn't known themselves. Before moving to the next phase, getting Graham to ask David for payment, detectives needed to verify his story. First, they pulled surveillance footage from the gas station Graham had mentioned. Sure enough, there was David Knight at the pump, filling gas cans, while Graham sat clearly visible in the passenger seat. Then they dug into the burner phones. In ice rink footage from the night of the murder, David could be seen skating and talking on a phone. But his personal cell phone records show no calls at that time. When detectives checked the burner phone logs, they found calls between David and Graham. Not just that evening, but frequent communication in the weeks leading up to Carmela's death. After the murder, silence. The calls stopped cold. There was enough evidence to move forward. The undercover team prepared the final phase of their Mr. Big operation. They needed 2 things: an exchange of cash between David and Graham, and at least one piece of physical evidence linking David directly to the crime. That evidence, they planned, would be given to Ron, the terminally ill fall guy, to make the cover story airtight. By this point, investigators knew David's routine. He spent most afternoons at the Frog, a pub on Young Street. They told Graham to confront him there and demand his money. Agents were already stationed inside, disguised as customers, with hidden cameras and microphones placed throughout the bar, and even one secretly planted on Graham himself.
How they planted a microphone on Graham, I don't know, but it's just another just such an elaborate plan. And they've got all these undercover officers in the bar, acting like customers. I don't know how many people were involved in this operation, but
that is nuts. When David saw his old friend, he looked surprised, but after a few beers, he loosened up. David apologized for not paying what he owed and promised to make it right. Graham explained his plan to have a dying man confess to the murder. David seemed impressed. Later, Graham bragged to Joe and Uncle Dan, "He's impressed with how I'm handling myself. He knows I'm not a fucking rat. I don't have nobody tailing me." Oh, the irony.
I know.
Over the next few days, David and Graham met several more times. David eventually agreed to find something, anything from Carmela's belongings that could serve as evidence for the cancer patient's confession. The next day, Graham met with Joe and Uncle Dan and pulled out a small item. "A rosemary," he said. Joe frowned. "You mean a rosary?" Graham nodded. "Yeah, rosary, whatever. It came right from her purse. It's got her DNA on it." Finally, in February 2015, after several meetings, David produced some cash. It wasn't much, just $5,000, but it was enough. He slipped the money to Graham at the bar, unaware that undercover cameras were rolling. That was it, the final piece of the puzzle. As the man left the Frog that afternoon, officers closed in. After months of deception, surveillance, and patience, David Knight and Graham McDonald were both under arrest. The jig was up. David and Graham were both charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and arson. In Florida, David's brother Matthew Knight was arrested and extradited to Canada, charged as an accessory after the fact. Bail was denied for all 3 men. Even behind bars, there was no shortage of drama. At one point, Graham and Matthew were housed in the same facility. When they crossed paths, Graham attacked him, pummeling Matthew before guards pulled them apart. Both men spent time in solitary confinement afterward. Then, in September 2015, there was an attempted jailbreak at the detention center where David was being held. Inmates had started tunneling through a cell wall, but the plan was discovered before anyone escaped. News reports claimed David Knight was involved, though officers declined to confirm it. In April 2017, Matthew Knight pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact. He was sentenced to time served and 2 years probation, roughly 18 months behind bars in total. That seems kind of light. As Graham's trial approached in early 2018, his lawyers filed a motion to exclude the evidence from the Mr. Big operation. Remember that under the 2014 Supreme Court ruling, such confessions are presumed inadmissible unless prosecutors can prove 2 things. First, that the confession is reliable, and second, that police conduct didn't bring the administration of justice into disrepute. The first test was easy. Graham had revealed details only the killer could know. So his defense focused on the second, arguing that police plied him with alcohol during the sting and discouraged him from seeking legal advice. I think they might have a point there.
Yeah, maybe.
The judge did not agree that these actions brought the administration of justice into disrepute. Graham's confession to Mr. Big would be allowed.
I think that second part is a tricky one, right? Because police can't do anything that is shady or unethical, and yeah, maybe like drinking together might be a little bit unethical, but it's a very gray area, I would think.
So drinking together is one thing, but getting him drunk is another. Like not telling him, hey, maybe you've had enough, buddy, because he could be embellishing the story. I'm not defending him, but
right.
To preserve his right to appeal, Graham pleaded not guilty, but didn't contest the evidence. He waived a jury and opted for a judge-only trial, a formality that guaranteed conviction, but kept the door open for an appeal on the Mr. Big issue. Meanwhile, David Knight's lawyers requested a media blackout on Graham's trial, claiming it would prejudice potential jurors in David's own case. That motion was denied. Graham's trial lasted just 2 days. The verdict? Guilty on all counts. His sentence was automatic, life in prison with eligibility for parole after 25 years. He'll be 53 when that time comes.
David's trial began a few months later in October 2018, more than 4 years after Carmela's murder. He pleaded not guilty. One of the Crown's key witnesses was supposed to be Graham McDonald, but when he took the stand, prosecutors got a surprise. Graham entered the courtroom in cuffs and shackles, muttering to himself. When asked to stand and take an oath, he exploded, shouting profanity and flashing obscene gestures. "I'm giving you the finger," he said. "Go fuck yourself. Put that on the record." The judge warned him about contempt and advised him to speak with his lawyer. Graham shot back. "There's nothing to discuss. I have no business being here." He was immediately removed from the courtroom.
Wow.
He was later convicted of contempt and sentenced to 4 years, but those 4 years were to be served concurrently with his life sentence, meaning that it really changed nothing.
4 years for contempt? That seems like a pretty big sentence.
It does, but in the end, it really didn't mean anything.
Right.
But yeah, it does seem like quite a bit. Even without Graham's testimony, prosecutors had plenty. Audio and video recordings from the sting, Graham describing the plot in detail, footage of David handing over cash, and surveillance of the 2 men at the gas station. David's brother Matthew took the stand against him, testifying for 3 full days. He said that when he first heard about the fire, he knew what must have happened. He confronted Graham at his motel, and Graham admitted that he had done it. Asked why he didn't call police, Matthew simply said, "It was not my job." David's defense was simple. He claimed he had nothing to do with it. If Graham killed Carmela, he acted on his own. Graham, he said, was a career criminal and drug addict who concocted the story to save himself. David took the stand for 5 days, denying everything, the payments, the burner phones, even the plan involving the terminal cancer patient. When shown the $5,000 and the rosary that Graham left the bar with, David insisted that Graham must have stolen them from his pocket. In closing arguments, David's attorney accused the police of coercion, saying, "A more coerced police confession has yet to be seen." That seems like a bit of a stretch to me. The trial stretched over 4 months.
4 months?
Yeah. The jury deliberated for a full day before returning a verdict, guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and arson. Like Graham, David received a mandatory life sentence with eligibility for parole after 25 years. The judge had discretion on whether the other counts would run concurrently or consecutively. Carmela's mother, Franca DeGosta, made a powerful victim impact statement. He was supposed to love and protect Carm, not murder her. He had no mercy for Carmela, and the court should have no mercy for him. In the end, the judge ruled that the additional sentences would run concurrently, meaning that David Knight will be eligible for parole after 25 years. He'll be 67 years old at that time. Both David Knight and Graham McDonald indicated that they planned to appeal their convictions, but there's no public record of either case moving forward. Hopefully that means they either decided against it or that their appeals were unsuccessful. In October 2019, the Durham Police Homicide Unit was recognized during the annual Police Appreciation Dinner and Awards Night for their work on Carmela's case. Carmela's family has kept a low profile since the trials. Her mother, Franca, her sister, Nancy, and her youngest son, Dylan, all appeared on the Dateline episode about the case. Dylan said that, at first, he couldn't believe his father was responsible for his mother's death, but over time, he came to accept the truth. After their mother's murder, Dylan and his brother were raised by their Aunt Nancy. She and her husband have 2 younger children, and Dylan says he feels like a big brother now. Nancy's friends later gave her a special gift, a necklace engraved with Carmela's handwriting that reads, "Love Carm." She treasured it so much that she had an identical one made for her mom. Today, both women wear their necklaces to keep Carmela close to their hearts. Every year, the family gathers to celebrate Carmela's birthday, to remember her laughter, her kindness, and the love that she poured into everyone around her. Rest in peace, Carmela. A few questions for you. What do you think ultimately pushed David Knight to kill Carmela? Do you think it was the financial pressure, the loss of control after she was going to divorce him, or was it just pure selfishness?
It's probably a combination of all those factors, right?
I'm sure it was a combination, but in my opinion, it was mostly the financial stuff. Like, he was in over his head and he had all this stuff going on, and he was going to get divorced and he was probably going to have to pay support. So I think he was just he found himself in a spot that he felt like he was between a rock and a hard place and had to come up with cash.
True, but in order to kill someone, you have to, be a narcissistic, selfish, horrible person too.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the police undercover operation, the Mr. Big sting. Do you think they were justified in using this elaborate undercover sting, given the risks we talked about with, these type of tactics can often lead to coercion and false confessions?
You said it's legal in Canada, and if it's a tool available to you in your arsenal, then why not use it?
Yeah.
But you said it's used less frequently now than it used to be
because of that Supreme
cases,
Court ruling. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of restrictions around it, but I love it. I think obviously you have to be super careful.
Right.
But I just think it's a really clever, creative way to learn what happened.
Well, knowing you and the way your mind works, I can see how, you just would love to create that.
Yeah.
That scheme in your head.
Right. It reminds me a little of the movie Donnie Brasco with Johnny Depp and Al Pacino, where Johnny Depp goes undercover with the mob, and it just fascinates me when these guys have to put on this different persona. They have to be actors in addition to investigators.
Right?
I mean, in some ways, but it could also be pretty dangerous.
Yeah, pretty stressful.
Yeah. Do you think the sentences that David and Graham got were just? So they both got life in prison, but they're eligible for parole after 25 years.
I don't really know. I think Canada's justice system is a little more lenient than here in the United States. Like in the United States, they probably would have gotten a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
Right, because it was clearly premeditated.
Yeah, I don't really know. I'd like to believe that there is a chance for anyone to be rehabilitated, and a 25-year sentence, maybe you should be given
that opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really tricky.
It is a tough one. Every country has different, sort of norms.
What surprises me, this is a little off topic, but how many people are still, like Jeffrey McDonald, which is the very first case that I ever did for Love, Marry, Kill. Like, he's in his 80s and he's still alive in prison. You know, I know life in prison can't be easy, and I don't think they feed you especially well. So, you know, how are all these people still, I know plenty of people die in prison, but you know what I mean? Like, plenty of people are alive in prison in their 80s.
Yeah. If you get convicted of something like, first degree murder at a very young age, you're spending a lot of time in prison if you live to be that long. And that's, Graham, I don't know how old he was. He must have been fairly young, because I think I said he's eligible to get out in his early 50s, I think.
53, I think you said.
Yeah. So, he still has potential to have a life. And like you said, you hope that people could be rehabilitated. But at the same time, taking someone's life in like a purely cold blood, premeditated way, it's just so hard to get past that, It's hard to imagine.
I tend to think if you take someone's life that you should be in prison for the rest of your life. But it's hard in this situation because David, he didn't kill anyone. It's just kind of hard sometimes to decipher that in my head. Like, okay, so he didn't kill anyone. He planned it.
Right.
But the guy who, it's like, who is the guiltier party there?
Yeah.
Are they both equally guilty? I'm not sure.
That is a tough one. What about Matthew's sentence? So Matthew apparently knew it was going to happen because he told his wife, but he only got 18 months.
I will admit to you, I'm not exactly sure what Matthew is guilty of.
I mean, it's not 100% clear what he's guilty of. It seems like he knew that David was planning this in advance, because he told his wife, Heather, that I knew exactly, I could have put a stop to this, and I didn't. So it seems like he could have changed the outcome and, reported David before it happened, or at the very least, he could have, after it happened, he knew exactly what happened, and he still failed to go to the police.
Yeah.
So I don't know, 18 months seems pretty light.
It does. But if all he is guilty of is not going to the police with the information, I don't know. I wish we knew a little more about that, I guess.
Yeah, I do too.
I have a question for you. This is almost our 200th case. Do you see what women are up against? Has this changed your impression of relationships between men and women doing this podcast for so long? Like, how many men are really innately dishonest with their partner, and how, it's really hard for a lot of women to leave a relationship.
Yeah.
What have you learned from doing the podcast for 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I always, knew that was a situation for a lot of women, but it has made it maybe even more like shocking how many of these stories we talk about where women are in a really dangerous, scary situation. It's very, very difficult to get out of that situation.
You talked about the woman in Florida, right. David's girlfriend.
Jill, yeah.
Okay, Jill. And she didn't really ask too many questions, and she didn't know a lot about David, and you thought that was strange that she didn't ask a lot of questions. But can you see how women want to think, oh, he's a good guy, and, there are not a lot of good guys around, so might not be perfect, but, I'll settle for him. How so many women end up doing that because, you're a unicorn.
No, that's not true, but
you are definitely a unicorn.
There's a lot of good guys out there. There are also a lot of bad guys out there as well.
Well, remember a month ago, we were talking about the woman who put a billboard up. I think her name, it was Mary Lisa. And we had a lot of listeners say, you guys really should start a dating website because it really is hard to find someone.
Yeah. I'm not sure that you're going to find someone by
the true crime community.
Yeah, maybe not. But going back to your original point, like Carmela in this case, I feel like she did everything right, and still
so many women do.
I know exactly. That's just so sad. It's a very difficult situation to get out of.
I think that is the most dangerous part of a woman's life, is when she's trying to leave her partner.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Well, that is the story of Carmela and David Knight.
Were you thinking of Carmela Soprano a lot during that episode?
I was, yes.
Me too.
We talked a lot in this episode about the Mr. Big operations, and it got me thinking about like ethical policing, and where I think police are in a very difficult position.
I thought you were going to give me a Sex in the City quiz.
No.
I'm disappointed.
I am going to give you a quiz to find out what you would be like as a detective.
Okay, but first, can I ask you, are you a Charlotte, a Miranda, a Samantha, or a Carrie?
I have absolutely no idea.
You watched Sex in the City with me.
I know, but it's been a long time.
I don't think you watched all of it.
Yeah, I don't even really remember.
You're probably a Miranda.
Okay.
I think I'm
What does
a
that mean?
sharp. It means you're smart.
Oh,
Well, you
okay.
tell us that you're smart all the time.
Does Miranda do that too?
I mean, she just is smart. Where
Okay.
you just
Well,
tell
then
us that you're smart.
I think I'm a Miranda then, and you are
I don't know. I'm Tina.
cop out.
I think I'm a little bit of a Charlotte and maybe a little bit of Carrie. Maybe
Okay.
a smidge of Miranda.
All
I
right.
don't really think I'm a Samantha.
I feel like you're trying to avoid this ethical policing
You know me,
quiz.
I have no ethics.
Well, I'm going to give you a few scenarios,
Okay.
and you have to tell me how you react. So, first one, you are a rookie detective. You stop into a local diner. It's popular with the force.
I would like a piece of cherry pie.
You go in, you go to pay for your meal, and the owner says, no, your money's no good here. You guys keep the neighborhood safe. It's the least I can do. Now, you know that department policy strictly forbids accepting gratuities of any kind. What do you do?
Oh, well, if it's against policy, then I would say thanks, but no thanks.
Okay, excellent. Very, very upright, very honest. Okay,
I
scenario
would take a
two.
free donut every now and then, though,
Okay.
but not a whole meal.
So you would draw the line at a donut, but not a whole meal. Gotcha. All right. Second scenario. You have arrested a suspect who you are certain has kidnapped a young girl. The girl has been missing for 48 hours, and you believe that time is running out. The suspect is sneering at you, refusing to talk. You believe that if you physically threaten him or use enhanced interrogation techniques, there's a chance that he'll reveal her location. But if you wait for a lawyer and you follow standard procedure, you think that the girl will die.
Oh.
I know this is not. These are not easy questions.
Um.
Do you beat him up and get him to fess up, or do you let the legal system, go by the book?
Well, I would go by the book because you have to follow the law, and yeah, it would
Poor
be
little
thrown
girl.
out. Oh, you mean like it would be okay
Like you're
to
trying to
have the
save a
case
girl's life.
thrown? Yeah. Oh, okay. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I saved the little girl.
Okay, so you're gonna beat him up.
I have brass knuckles. I always keep them with me just in case.
Okay.
So
I
yeah,
think that's a good answer.
yeah.
All right. You and your partner pursue a suspect who fled after a violent mugging. When you corner him in an alley, he surrenders and raises his hands. Your partner, still running on adrenaline and anger, hits the suspect with his baton, knocking him down. The suspect is hurt, but not critically. When writing the report, your partner says, "Hey, could you just leave out that part when I hit him and just say that he tripped?" What do you do?
I probably would. Yeah,
You would what?
I would leave it out.
Really? You'd be like,
I think you have to. I'm not saying it's right, but
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think your part. Yeah, you have to.
got to support your
You have
partner
to support your
here.
partner.
And really no harm was done anyway. So,
Yeah. Although I do not believe in police brutality at all.
okay.
But
Okay. But you're willing to look the other way to
I
support
mean,
your partner.
so I'm not like me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you're asking me personally, but yeah, I think you have to right. What would you do? You're not answering what you would do.
I probably would also support my partner in that case.
If it's
I think
very
there's-
minor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you felt like it wasn't like a pattern that your partner was,
Yeah, but not like
always
a knee on his neck.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, next one. You are investigating a serial drug trafficker who has evaded capture for years. After a tip, you search a warehouse, you find a massive stash of heroin and other evidence that proves his guilt. However, you realize after the fact that the address on the search warrant was off by a digit. So technically, the search was illegal and the evidence will be thrown out of court if you admit the mistake. Do you admit that there was a mistake and let the evidence get thrown out, or do you lie and say, oh, it was corrected on the warrant?
So you're painting me to be a corrupt cop here
I'm
with
just,
all these questions.
I think police often have to deal with very morally
Yeah.
gray situations.
I think if the number, so what would I do? Like change the number on this search warrant?
I think what you could
Because
do.
the search warrant comes from the judge.
No, I guess the other alternative is that you would testify that you saw the suspect run into that building, which justified you entering the building. So you find some justification, even
yeah.
though you didn't technically have a warrant.
I feel like I've already compromised my integrity, so can't
At
anymore.
this point, you might as well
so
just go all the way.
no, I have to follow.
Oh, you're going to follow the book on this
Yeah.
one? Okay. Let the
What about you?
drug user go free. Yeah, I don't know. That's actually a tough one. I think I would follow the book too, though.
Yeah.
I'm a rule follower, though.
You really are.
Yeah. All right, last one.
I kind of am not. Just I think
I
people kind
know.
of know that in general.
Yeah,
not really.
You're a renegade.
No, not at all.
card.
Like I used to be. Now I'm pretty much I hardly ever, well, I speed, but depending how you define speeding. But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. All right, last one. You have a high value confidential informant who provides you with tips that have led to arrests of major cartel leaders. One night, the confidential informant is picked up for a minor offense like drunken disorderly or petty theft. If you let him get booked, his cover might be blown or he might stop helping you. So do you let him be booked like anyone else and let the law be the law? Or do you pull some strings and get him released without being charged?
I mean, aren't you supposed to do that for your CI?
I mean, technically,
I
technically he
think
broke the law.
McNulty did, right? On The Wire.
Oh, McNulty. I thought you said Nick Nolte. McNulty. Yeah. Well, McNulty, I don't know if McNulty is the best example of a ethical detective, but
yeah,
you would.
I mean, I think that police do all the time for their CIs, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think that one's probably not that uncommon at all. All right. Well, you scored, we're going to call you the utilitarian.
Okay.
You believe that the ends justify the means. You're driven by noble cause corruption. So the belief that sometimes you have to do bad things to achieve a greater good. You want to get along with your fellow officers. You want to smooth things over. So
yeah, I think that's true.
I think that's reasonable.
How about you?
I think I'm probably that, or I might be more of the by the book person. I'm a little bit in the middle.
So your partner isn't going to trust you as much, and the guys on the force aren't going to invite you
exactly
to go out for drinks with them.
That's the problem with the by the book detective.
Yeah, you're going to report your fellow officers if their shoes aren't shiny enough. Yeah.
You probably would be the pariah of the police department. And
I'd get promoted faster than you.
Totally, you would.
So I tried to write a poem for you for your birthday, but it was a spectacular fiasco. So I am just going to say some words to you.
Oh.
That you're amazing. You're loved. You work super duper hard for our family. You work really hard for this podcast, and you're loved and appreciated, and you're handsome.
Oh.
No one knows that but me, but you're very handsome, and I don't know. Just happy birthday. You are amazing. You are the best. And I hope you have a wonderful year.
Oh, thank you so much. That sounded like poetry to me. So I will accept that as poetry.
I am not I'm okay with words, but I'm not good at poetry. I've just never been a poet. And you know it.
I do. Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. I appreciate it. One last thing before we go, I wanted to give a quick shout out to a fellow podcaster. Her name is Eileen Zen. She reached out to us about a case that really needs more attention. She created a show. It's called The Victim in Surprise, and it tells the story of her friend Amal Bajat, who was murdered in her home near Phoenix in 2017. The case remains unsolved, and Eileen is working really hard to bring awareness and push for justice. So if you're looking for a powerful, personal true crime story, check out The Victim in Surprise and help to amplify Amal's story.
And you'll put a link to her show in our show notes?
Absolutely.
We have received a lot of nice emails and messages from listeners recently saying that they just appreciate the work that we do. And I just want to say thank you sincerely. We appreciate your support and your encouragement. It means so much to us.
It does. Please rate, review, follow, and subscribe. Find us on social media and YouTube, or send us an email at lovemarykill@gmail.com.
And please consider supporting us on patreon.com/lovemarykill. One tier, $5 a month for early ad-free access and a monthly bonus episode.
Until next time.
Don't kill your husband.
And don't kill your wife.